have the absolute pleasure of hearing from archaeologist Mark Olly. Mark Olly is the man who is bringing a whole smorgasbord of ancient, alternative, and maybe even alien artifacts to this year's Awakening UFO and Conscious Life Expo in Blackpool. Mark, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's a pleasure.
It's such a pleasure, and it's a real honor, and I absolutely adore your work. It's so fascinating, and your service to humanity is incredible.
Oh, never thought of it in those terms. But yeah, thank you very much.
Absolutely. You're the host of ITV's Lost Treasures. I'm just going to give you a little bio here. Author of the book Crystal Skulls and Human Heads, and producer of many fascinating media programs, documentaries on ancient or even maybe future artifacts. We'll get into all that, this kind of timeline manipulation thing that I know I've heard you talk about before. But first, I just want to say this is an exclusive interview. It's part of our ongoing coverage of the Awakening UFO and Conscious Life Expo in Blackpool, and we are working in affiliation with Zohar Entertainment and Gaia. I'm Kristen Gillespie. I'm your conscious investigative reporter. Mark, let's kick it off. What is the most highly strange and unusual artifact that we get to see up close and personal at this year's Awakening Expo? I want to know from you.
Okay, actually there's two that are prime, absolutely prime. One is, of course, a UFO fragment. It's part of the UFO crash that occurred in Wales, not far from Aberystwyth. We've actually got a very, very small piece of the debris, the wreckage from that, which has a fascinating breakdown when you actually look at how it's made up, what it's made of, when the crash took place, what was available, etc. at that time. It's definitely alien in the sense that it's not like anything we've ever seen before, certainly not members of the public. So that's going to be there. And then the second item, of course, is I'm hoping to have a real Aztec Mayan crystal skull at the exhibition. That's coming, and that'll be in a cabinet with several other different skulls that we've got that are going to be there. So for me, those two would be, without doubt, the highlights of the archaeological display.
Wow. Can we break it down a little bit more? And I want you to tell me the top 10 most mind-blowing artifacts that you've been in contact with, or maybe that you're going to bring. I mean, do you have a kind of a guesstimate as to how many we're going to get to see here?
Right, I'm not sure exactly how many display cases are going to be available, and I know that Zohar themselves have got artifacts that they want to put out. So I'm assuming that we're looking at maybe 8, 10, possibly as many as 12 at the maximum cabinets. I would estimate you're looking at probably between 5 and 10 artifacts per each display case, but I've not actually had time to measure them up and look at them yet. So if you want to talk about exclusive, we're still in the planning stage. The list I'm going to give you today hasn't been approved. Nobody's actually seen it yet, but I've got a vibe, a sort of feel for what they're looking for. So at least one case will have the alien fragment in it, and hopefully it'll have a lot of display that will explain that. And there's photographs from the DVD Europe's Roswell, which I produced in association with that. Another one is focusing solely on skulls, the crystal skulls, like I mentioned, which will have at least 2 South American skulls in there. One will be the crystal one, and another one we think is made from volcanic glass, which is a form of obsidian, which is green. And then there's going to be a few other display items. There's a copy of the famous Mitchell Hedges Skull of Doom and 1 or 2 other bits and bobs going in there. That's pretty amazing. But then out of all the rest of the cabinets, I'm hoping to bring some of the oldest man-made objects in the north of England, which were deposited during the gap after the first ice age, and they date from a mere 480,000 BC. And there are 7 of these flints that are coming, plus a couple of others which are related, some from a little bit more recent, a mere 250,000 BC. And there's at least one item coming which is hopefully made by Neanderthals, which is going to go into that display. So that's prehistoric flints. I'm trying to get a hold of a copy of a saber-toothed tiger skull as well to put in there, but I don't know how big the cabinet is. I want to bring a display of witchcraft artifacts because I think that's appropriate. We've got plenty of original stuff. I've got an original container that belonged to Aleister Crowley, and he actually scratched his signature into the body of it. So I'm hoping to bring that. and display that. I've got an original witch sword, and I've got lots of other original stuff there. If they want me to, I'd be quite pleased to bring, I've got Knights Templar equipment and Masonic regalia and lots of stuff like that, which I think would make a nice one-off, one cabinet display. I'm a big fan of looking at things extraterrestrial, so I want a cabinet, if I can, of meteorites and debris associated with outer space. So that's another one I'm looking at. I think we've probably got one or two previously unseen UK meteorites that I can put in there. But you get the sort of flavour for where that's going. That's sort of the direction I'm heading in. Loads of archaeology stuff as well. I'm going to try and bring some historical artifacts and things that people can see. So it's going to be one heck of a display. We're throwing everything we've got at it. And I'm going to be actually physically sat there with the display, hopefully for the Friday and then the Saturday and the Sunday as well. And people can come up to me, they can ask me questions about the display, about archaeology books, history, the books I published and what have you. And we can take it from there. So, you've got a rolling show there, if you like, a rolling interview with me.
Mark Olly on demand doesn't get any better than that. So let's zero in on these crystal skulls, because I know there's a lot of interest around that. And I've heard you qualify what a real skull is, and it has to do with the size. You're saying it's the size of a small child here, just to illustrate the magnitude of what we're talking about. You've got this problem now where for the last probably 20, 30 years, because of the popularity of skulls, there are tens of thousands of what are essentially machine-made reproduction skulls out there of all sizes, all different sizes. They're everywhere. So what I tend to do is I try and boil it down to the fact that the skull has got to be essentially handmade and not produced using modern day tools. So that automatically knocks the whole of those skulls out of the reckoning. None of them are of any particular age. The ones you find in museums in London, in Paris, various other skulls, most of those are regarded to be real South American skulls, but they show signs of being wheel turned. So they've had spinning wheels and they've ground them using that kind of machinery. That dates them probably to no older than the 1800s. So you're only looking at a couple of hundred years. But there are one or two out there that are totally 100% no tool marks. You can't work out how they're made. And by looking at them, you can see that somebody has sat there and actually carved a block of crystal down to what is, as you rightly say, essentially a life-size skull. I've got one, the Mitchell Hedges skull is another one. There's one in the ballpark at Coba in South America. It's set in the floor, so that's archaeologically sound. And very recently, there was another one found in an Aztec excavation just outside Mexico City. So I know of at least 4 that fall under that qualification. Ideally, if there's some kind of archaeological record or there's some, validatable story behind them, which I believe the Mitchell Hedges skull is correct, Anna stuck to a story right to a dying day. Things like that are additionally convincing to say, yes, they are real. So yes, in the book, Crystal Skulls and Human Heads, that list is there for people to see. That's what I'd be looking for, in a real one. What I found really fascinating about your work is that there's 5th dimensional data written on the glass, which is sort of the silica within these skulls. Can you go into that a little bit? What's this data? How might we obtain this information for ourselves?
Okay, that's pushing 2 different pieces of information together, which the book does, but it doesn't necessarily go the whole 9 yards with that. Over here in the UK, I think it's Southampton University are producing silica glass discs, which, as you rightly say, you can write information in there using certain lasers in 5D. I mean, the amount of storage capacity in a disc like that is insane. You could put the whole of humanity into a few of those discs and they'll survive for 30, 40,000 years without any degradation. So as soon as you can do that, as soon as you can do that with silica, I obviously asked the question, well, there's been this legend that there was some data of some kind contained in these skulls. All the mind body spirit fairs that have ever seen these skulls displayed, because there are a lot of sort of ones knocking around in private collections. Everybody's saying if you get them all together, they'll exchange data and this, that, and the other. And people are going, well, that's impossible because they're crystals. No, the bit that's impossible is we just don't know how to read the data. We don't know what they used or what we can use to get the data out of silicon crystals, but there's a huge amount of research. Even the Ghostbusters say, you know, if you're in an environment that's high in quartz, if there's a lot of quartz in that, that's where you tend to get ghosts and things like that appearing, which in my mind could just be a holographic replay of the data under certain circumstances. So it kind of overlaps, if you like, beyond the remit of the book into other areas. So yeah, absolutely. So in essence, you're right.
And one thing I was wondering, Mark, is are these artifacts like catalysts for vibrational upgrades or downloads individually, or even collective spiritual evolution, like a, you know, sort of Kickstarter, if you will?
I have experienced over many years the effect that ancient artifacts have on certain people and on members of the public. And surprisingly, for somebody in my position as an archaeologist, I think the answer to that, even scientifically, the answer would be yes. Yes, they do change people's outlooks and the way people think and the way people, you know, handle objects like that. It's not just the wow factor. You know, there's definitely something else going on there. You know, you're connecting with your ancestors, you're connecting with the past. You know, these things do contain a phenomenal amount of data that science is only just catching up on, you know, all the dating methods, you know, who knows what recording methods. Oh, I've got to tell you this is an exclusive to you. Some guys were looking at this pot in France. They had a Roman pot. And what the guy had actually done who'd made this pot was he'd sat there as a potter and he's got the wheel spinning and he'd got like a knife or a stylus and he just put the grooves in this pot like that. He'd put the grooves in and he'd shape round the pot like that. Some bright spark thought, I wonder what happens if we put a record player needle into the grooves on that pot. So they stuck a needle in, they played the soundtrack on the pot, and you could hear in the background all the noises outside his pottery and some little kid running past talking Latin. Now, doesn't that make all the hairs on your body stand on end? A 2,000-year-old potter's pot has got a recording in the grooves of the sounds that were occurring at that time because it had passed down the stylus he was using on that pot. Now, that's a fantastic story. I've not told anybody else that, but it's only a fairly recent development, which just goes to show what else is there out there. You know, I mean, these guys in France now are running around grabbing Roman things out of museums and trying to play everything they can get their hands on. So I don't know where that's gone. That'll have developed since then. But I heard that audio, and it was played to me. And honestly, listening to this little kid running around in the background, shouting something in Latin, and it's dead right. I mean, they've got a translation of it. So, you know, who knows what else is in there? We just have to work it out.
That's right. Mark, Olly, you just gave me goosies. Yeah. That is
well, that's the point. Yep, that's the point. You know, if people come to the exhibition, if it's possible, if these cabinets will unclip, I'm not averse to letting people handle some of the actual objects as long as they're very careful with them, obviously, and don't turn up with a gun and hold me up, you know, like give me a crystal skull. You know, as long as they don't do anything silly with them, I'm not averse to people handling them.
If that's not a selling point, I don't know what is. I definitely want to handle it if you trust me with that one.
Well, yeah, if you're there, do it on camera because, you know.
Yeah, I'm looking for my 12-strand DNA upgrade over here. I need that activation.
Well, I guarantee, I mean, if you hold the crystal skull in particular, it's got a wow factor because you go to pick it up and it's twice as heavy as you expect it to be. And it's absolutely stone cold because of the high lead content in the silica. And as soon as you pick it up and you stare it in the face, wow, you know, wow, it definitely gets you.
And is there
You're staring at something from the past.
Thank you. Sorry for interrupting. Is there a link between the crystal, the silica, and the building of the human brain?
Yes, there is. I explore that in the book. I was quite surprised because I went off to try and find out what part silica plays in the human body. And when you're developing as a baby, when you're actually still in the womb, a deficiency of silica affects the skull and the brain's development. So I thought, wow, they must have made that connection somehow in the distant past in order to choose a skull to represent that. And again, you know, everything that you find inside a quartz crystal, so the electricity, the heat and light qualities, there's water in there, the substance it's made of, the chemistry, all of that, you actually find all of those things in a human body. So when you pick one of these things up, you're picking up essentially an electric field and a magnetic generator, something that can power a wristwatch. You know, if you put it under pressure, that's bound to have an effect. You know, because we're the same, we're made of the same stuff. You know, we can feel the effect that it has through the electricity. You know, it's kind of fire, water, earth, and air, and all that. But it really ties all that together. It really ties it together. I think it was Tesla. Tesla actually said these crystals are living creatures. They are alive. And I looked at that and I thought, you know, he's a really intelligent guy, but I really don't understand what he means. Now I do. Now I know what he meant. He meant that, you know, as the earth is alive and is itself quartz, as quartz is in something like crystals, etc., it's in us as well. And that's what he was getting at. It's all connected.
Yes, and that fallacy of looking back at ancient civilizations as primitive when their technology was far superior than what we have now.
Well, it's that word, it's technology. When we say technology, we think cars, planes, trains, you know, all this sort of stuff. No, what the true technology is a total understanding and a total appreciation of the world you live in. That's true technology. That would solve everything, you know. So these ancients were living with that on a daily basis. Their understanding would just floor us. It would flatten us. They know how they did what they did. And quite frankly, in most cases, we don't. You know, I mean, how the heck do you shift a 300-ton block halfway up a wall, you know, and just slide it in? You know, they were doing this every day. There's so many things they did, and we just don't know how they did it, literally. So, yes, I suppose they were in many ways superior to us. Yeah.
Absolutely. And maybe this is a good time, no pun intended, to go into the timeline manipulation. The interdimensionality and the role of consciousness in the forces that have an impact and effect on these artifacts.
Well, if you just go down the basic principle that things record things, you know, not just physically but spiritually, then anything that's coming from the past is going to have something about it. You know, it's going to have that human touch, that magnetism, that whatever you want to call it. So all the artifacts that I'm bringing into the exhibition, back to that again, will have something of that about them. They will have been, if you like, magnetized by, you know, people in the past. A good example, the Hoxton cutting tool that I'm bringing, 480,000 BC. I was at a Mind Body Spirit fair, and this woman picked it up, and she was holding it, and she just went, oh! She went, I can see this massive wall of ice, and there's a guy there with animal skins on, and he's got horns on his head. He's wearing like an antlered headpiece. Now, at that point, it was my turn to go a bit cold and have the hair on my body stand on end, because what she didn't know is that that was found facing where that ice sheet would have been, and we get those antlered headpieces from Starcar in Yorkshire, which is just down the road. So everything she described about that guy in 480,000 BC was archaeologically correct. Now, this is just a member of the public. So you think, wow, bearing in mind, like you started out to say, that these objects have got such things to offer, I think we should be looking at things like this in a different way, you know, back to the time travel, back to the what things record, where things are. I think I conclude the book by saying, you know, the guys that lived way back, whatever you want to call them, Atlanteans, whatever, at the end of the day, if they knew more than we know now, maybe they knew more about time and space and dimensions and other aspects of what I would call natural technology that we've just lost, you know, since the Victorians, Industrial Revolution, come on, let's dominate the planet kind of attitude. You know, we've lost it. We've lost that connection. They still had that connection, you know, clearly they did. So, yeah, I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, this is like a no miss opportunity, everybody. Come to the Awakening UFO and Conscious Life Expo for your chance to get catalyzed, activated, and get hands-on with these incredible artifacts.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, I've got this vision. I've got this vision of the event, and I just can't wait for it to happen. And please, I hope it happens. I really do. You know, you've got Eric von Daniken, who is the man that made us think. You know, it doesn't matter whether you agree with him or disagree with him or whatever. He's the man that got all these objects, all these different discoveries and everything together, and he made people think. He made people look at them and a totally different way. I'm dying to meet him. I just want the two of us to get together over a cup of coffee. And if the cameras are there and there's people there, and I want to interview Eric, and Eric's going to interview me, and that's how that's going to go. That's how it's going to happen. But I just can't wait for that to happen in a room full of ancient objects. It's just going to be a moment. It is going to be a moment, and I'm predicting that. I mean, we're still, I don't know, a month off the event, month plus. But I'm predicting that at some point that is going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, but at some point that's going to happen. So, let's hope that's going to be as amazing as I think it's going to be.
Absolutely. And let's hope I'm there with a few cameras to capture that moment too, because I at least want to be a fly on that wall when you and Eric Fonana can get together. I had the opportunity of interviewing him yesterday, and he was the man that literally opened my mind, over a decade ago when my awakening kickstarted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as I don't want to make him feel old. Please don't let me make him feel old. But as a child, my dad had, Chariot of the Gods and a lot of his other books up there on the shelf. I've still got Chariot of the Gods, actually. I must get him to sign it while I'm there. I'm not going to do that. Well, you can imagine handing it to him and going, "Here, Eric, this is my dad's book. Can you sign that?" He's going to be, that makes me feel really old. So I probably won't ask him to sign my dad's book, but I'll get him to sign it anyway while I'm there. But yeah, wow. He's changed my approach as an archaeologist just because it made me ask the question, is it what I'm looking at? Is it obviously what I'm looking at, or is there more to it? Think outside the box. I've got Eric's 10 out of 10 for that. He made me think that way. And it's proven to be, shall we say, in the long term, that's proven to be the right attitude, the right approach, because you can't go into things assuming that you know how things automatically are in the past. You can't. What does it say? Assume makes an ass out of you and me. That's one of these business zip lines, and it does, and that applies to archaeology and history as well.
It's so true. I'm a massive super fan of Eric and yourself. There's so many great minds, and this is the meeting of great minds, great hearts, and the expanded levels of consciousness. And when you take part in that, as we know, that group effect amplifies the consciousness or the intent even more. So these events can be incredibly explosive, activating, mind-blowing, and healing as well.
Well, yes. I mean, you've got to bear in mind that, we're coming out of the lockdown, out of the pandemic, out of all the nonsense that's gone on for the last few years. And you've got this absolutely phenomenal lineup of people all coming together on one spot, one time, one place, one spot. That can only speak well to the future. That is not necessarily an end in itself. It's going to prove to be a beginning. It's going to move us forward into whatever's coming next.
Absolutely. It's almost like that little Tesla coil in energy, just for humanity's next level. And there was something I was going to ask you about. I'm going to shift gears slightly, but it is related. Okay. The tagline of your book, Crystal Skulls and Human Heads, is really interesting to me, slightly cryptic, if you will. It's the mystical history of glass and the extinction of the world. I got to know what you mean by that. Can you delve into that one for us?
Right. Well, the mystical history of glass, which is the first bit, was the wow factor when I started looking at silicon, because silicon is absolutely everywhere. You wouldn't believe how much of it there is. It's glass, it's in silicon chips, it's in the buildings we live in, it's in the bath sealant we use, to stop water getting down the back of the bath. Silicon is everywhere. We are literally a carbon life form living in a silicon world. And the planet itself, the actual planet that's spinning through space, is a gigantic crystal. That's what the core's made of. It's made of amethyst. That's what they've established as far as science is concerned. We are literally this enormous glass environment, glass world. I mean, sand is everywhere, and that's what they make glass from. But when you live in the 21st century, you don't automatically look out the window and go, well, I'm looking through a sheet of sand there. It's been lost. There's so much to do with that. So that was the mystical history of glass, which occupies quite a chunk of the center of the book. The end of the world, coming out of lockdown, coming out of like the pandemic, people, I think, were shook up to find that something as small as a bacteria or, a virus could cause that amount of damage, to the human race. When you read the book, when you go through Crystal Skulls and Human Heads, It's about different races, different species of humans that have lived in the past. Almost all of them are no longer here. They've all had some kind of extinction event at some point. So the question I was asking at the end of the book is, where do we go from here? Do we survive? What is actually happening? Is it inevitable? So actually, that's more of a question. The extinction of the world is to sort of grab your attention and say, look, just file that one away till you get to the end of the book. I don't think we as a human race can automatically assume that we're going to be here forever, but we're certainly going to be here for a long time. No matter what it is, meteorite strike, comet, tidal wave, earthquake, volcanoes, whatever it is, we are still here. We are still surviving all of those things that have happened in the past. And there's no reason why, if we get it right, that we can't, as you say, ascend to a higher form and get into this mindset where we're actually doing it right instead of doing it wrong. And that really is the end of that zip line, the extinction of the world, almost question mark, where do we go from here sort of thing. So yeah, it's interesting. It is an interesting zip line, but it's there. Once you know those two threads are there, it runs that way through the entire book.
And it does tie into Eric von Daniken's work as well, the end times madness we are seeing everywhere in our reality right now, holographic, according to my version of events. And my understanding of the holographic reflection of my consciousness. When
you get to that last chapter, the issue of aliens comes up. You mentioned earlier the idea of time travel, interdimensional travel, etc., etc., etc. If you look at them as coming from another planet, or you look at them as coming from our future, it doesn't answer all the questions. That doesn't solve what they're doing, and it doesn't give you insight into what's happening. On the other hand, if you go, okay, they've cracked the time and space problem, they're far more advanced than Einstein, they know what they're doing. Maybe, just maybe, they're actually coming here to sort out the end of things. They're seeing how things are wrapping up. That in fact it's more about them appearing, and they're actually, it's like, Star Trek, all the aliens have got, one head, a body, 2 arms, 2 hands, legs. That's because they had a budget, so all the aliens in Star Trek end up looking like us in costumes. Well, it struck me that all the aliens we've got visiting, all these different species, have got that in common with us. They are all basically the same structure as us. So what happens if it is us? What happens if they actually are us, but from the beginning, and they're coming up to now to the end to try and find out what's going on? That's why they're testing people. That's why they're turning up at nuclear reactors and missile sites and all this kind of thing, because they don't think it's a good idea. And that's not how we should, if you like, conclude this particular part of our existence. And it's not how we're going to move on to the next one either. But I think that's the sensible answer. So yeah, that's how the end of the book kind of concludes and moves us forward. It's a message of hope. It's definitely a message of hope.
And we need that right now. And that really does tie into where we began. We've kind of come full circle in a way. In conclusion, Mark, can you tell me about the piece of crashed UFO given to you by this recovery team? Go into that story a little bit more, and then we'll finish up.
Okay, if folks want to find, I believe it's out there somewhere. It's on Amazon Prime, I think it is. You can go and find the documentary. It's called Europe's Roswell, and that looks at this UFO crash that happened in the 1980s at this village called Cynillar, which is just outside Aberystwyth in Wales. Big crash, loads of debris. They sent a recovery, a sort of a, how can I put it, not amateur, because they were certainly professional. They sent in the local UFO crash people, the crash investigators, but the MOD had already got in there before them and spent a couple of days clearing the site. So this UFO crash team contacted me and said, look, as an archaeologist, do you want to come and see if they missed anything? Is there anything there to dig up? As it turns out, there wasn't anything to dig up, but one of the crash recovery team, a guy called Gary Rowe, he said, well, I've got some pieces in my garage in a case. So me being an archaeologist, I'm like, oh, have you now? That's physical evidence, let's go and have a look. So the documentary revolves around the bigger fragments and the bigger pieces of this craft that he managed to recover within a matter of a few weeks of the original crash. There's nothing there now. There's nothing that we can dig up. We've checked it out several times, but he's still got these pieces. They're hidden away in storage. And he was really clever because he thought, well, you know, these pieces could be reclaimed. You know, the MOD could come and take them, or the Men in Black or whatever, who actually tried but failed because he broke one of the pieces up into 100 key rings and sent them out to people connected to the media. So press, authors like me, people involved in television, they all got these key rings, and I've got one, and that's the one I'm taking round, because it's not so much of a worry if that disappears, because it's not part of the original big crash pieces. But I am going to be bringing images of those bigger pieces for people to have a look at, and there's a lot of detail. You know, there's a lot to see in that. So there will be an original piece. It's only about the size of my fingernail, but that'll be there, and then there'll be a lot of other material there for people to see. There we go.
Fascinating, and it's another whole different area to explore, right? Perhaps a different type of activation. Who knows?
Well, I mean, if these creatures that are appearing, and if these ships are from anywhere other than here, then they warrant serious study and serious investigation. So, I mean, I've seen a couple of unidentified objects myself, UAPs flying around in the sky, mostly in the 1970s, I have to say. And I'm in a particular hotspot here between Liverpool and Manchester in the north of England.
Yes.
We get quite a lot of activity here. So I'm a firm believer that there's stuff going on that, you know, we don't know about. But yes, certainly warrants a huge amount of investigation. If there is one flying around up there somewhere and it's got windows, you know, I'm putting this out there. Please come and abduct me, aliens. You know, come and get me, and then let's sit at the window and fly back in time, because there's loads of things I want to see. You know, like fall of Rome, sinking of Atlantis. You know, boy, would I have a field day with these guys if they crack time and space. Come and get me.
Me too, Mark. Take me with you.
Oh, absolutely. Let's book our ticket.
100%. Listen, if I'm having this much fun in this interview, imagine how much fun we're going to have at the event itself.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Come and see me. Come and find me.
We'll really look forward to meeting you there. I'm going to do a more in-depth interview, and actually we'll have some cameramen there and stuff, so I'll get to sort of interview you, and you can show us all of these beautiful artifacts, these interesting artifacts, these advanced technology even in person. So that'll be so exciting.
Okay, let me just blow you away then. If we're making a deal here to meet up, what is your favorite period of time, history, object? What would you, if you had a choice, if you're going to walk into a museum, where would you go, and what would you like to have to see, to handle? What would you like to come into contact with? There you go.
I'm going to go ancient Egypt.
Ancient Egypt, right. I will bring something for you that's from ancient Egypt then. All right, there you go. It's a deal. I can't say what it is because I can't remember what I've got in storage, but there's a shed load of stuff I can bring. Okay, I'll bring you some real stuff.
Mark. Thank you so much. Something to look forward to, something else. So I'm just so grateful for your involvement in this year's Awakening UFO and Conscious Life Expo. Yeah. And just, you know, nobody wants to pass up this opportunity to see these amazing artifacts. You've got to come see it. Check out the event. There's details in the description below. And, come, it's hands-on, and there's so much going on. And as we said, it's a kind of amplifier of energetics. So it's going to be pretty spectacular. Just in conclusion, I just want to say thank you so much again, Mark, and I really look forward to meeting you in person and seeing all these artifacts. I'm Kristen Gillespie, in humble service to humanity and all sentient beings, signing off for now.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye for now. Bye-bye.